Let's get into the story now. Stanley Bezuidenhout, a car crash investigator and former road accident fund contractor, joins us now. Stanley, appreciate the time this afternoon and for joining us here on Newsfeed PM. Last year, it was 1,285. That's the end of 2023, of course. In 2024, we now have that figure as 1,502. Where did we go wrong? What happened?
Good afternoon. First of all, I think one of the biggest issues we've got to admit is that I think our focus in South Africa is in the wrong direction. We are trying to govern road users into better road use by using a bigger and bigger stick scenario. We are trying, I looked at the statistics as it were released, thousands of 700,000 fines issued, etc. The problem with South Africa is not one of compliance or one of people being law-abiding or not. It's an issue of culture. In South Africa, we have seen a literal decline in the respect for law. I'm specifically talking about road traffic laws in general. People have lost respect for law enforcement, and because they've lost respect and they watch other classes of motor vehicles commit offenses around them, I think the problem is with the psychology of the people, the road users. It's true that if we have law enforcement in place, that we have to take action. We have to, act against people who act unlawfully, illegally, and quite frankly, dangerously or recklessly, such as drunken driving or excessive speeding. But it's also true that we must find ways to drive people towards better road use culture in a way that's organic and that they want to. People mustn't adhere to the speed limit because they are threatened with fines and arrests. They must adhere to the speed limit because they understand the risks. And I personally think too little is done to address the issue of driving culture, and too much is done with this issue of accountability. I see in the statistics, they talk about ongoing work being done to improve the roads and make them safer. To the average South Africans, they just have to look in their neighborhood and they look at the number of new potholes, and on national roads, the terrible potholes. And they say, well, wait a minute, if everything's getting improved, if the roads are getting better, why are they more dangerous? How do we measure the risk that we face, the number of crashes increasing year on year, against the infrastructure and how well roads are maintained, how well roads are policed, how well people are educated? Telling people, for instance, I see reference to pedestrian jaywalking. When last have you heard of a jaywalking of infringement notice even being issued? Why do we speak to pedestrians and ask them please not to walk at night when they're intoxicated, but we issue fines to motor vehicles? I see signs all the time on national roads saying, caution pedestrians. I've never seen a sign on the side of the road saying caution cars. So I think it's a psychology issue. While we think that we can change everything by pulling out a bigger stick and trying to stop, fine, and arrest more and more people, I think the rest are simply going to keep becoming worse and worse. And then there's a question of, we know that these crashes are happening. We know that people are committing offenses. What's the conviction rate? How many of those people actually see consequences that you can measure in a way that the rest of society can take to heart?
Yeah, you make so many interesting and fascinating points then, Stanley. Let's talk about the change of culture. Is this by policing itself? Is this in the way, as you said, not necessarily by changing the rod and trying to make the rod bigger so you hit a little bit harder, but actually by just enforcing it? When you have elements such as bribery or perhaps just the ease of other people not being charged with criminal activity or whatever the case might be for their acts, that becomes where you lose the respect for the rule of law, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I had a friend of mine phone me one night and tell me that some 12 of their friends had been arrested or rather detained just down the road from some pub or club in Pretoria, and all of them, like 12 people, were taken to autobanks to draw money under threat of arrest. If we hear stories like that, anecdotal as 12 incidents on a single night may be, if we hear that traffic cops are getting bribed, that police officers are selling dockets, that dockets are going missing, it engenders within us a complete distrust in the process of law. Now what happens is you have a culture of a form of brinkmanship. You hide behind the bush and take a photograph of me as I pass by and send me a bill later that I must pay. And I try to push my luck as far as I can when I can't see you. There's tension, and this tension is going into two opposite directions. The public is losing complete respect for law enforcement, and law enforcement is seeing it as nothing more than a revenue generator. I myself drove into a roadblock during the festive season where they were checking licenses. And I said to the officer, Why are you standing on this particular spot? Is it a high crash zone? Are there many accidents here? Why? And he said, no, it's convenient for you. I said, what do you mean convenient? Look at the backlot here and the traffic that you've just backed up. And he said, no, it's to bring the traffic department closer to you. And I said, to achieve what? And he said, well, maybe you've got outstanding fines. And I said to him, so you're a debt collector? And he actually said, yes. And I have that recorded. So and quite frankly, I question that. Law enforcement has never had a debt collection duty. So in terms of the official mandate under the Constitution, I question whether it's even lawful for a traffic officer to stop you just to see if you owe money, which is not even going to their immediate fiscus. I have a problem with that. There are mechanisms and processes in place. If I don't pay my fine, issue summons, drag me to court, make me answer to a court. Stopping me on the side of the road and telling me you're a debt collector literally to my face causes me to trust you even less. This is less than 300 meters from a traffic light that's out where unemployed homeless people are directing traffic, and they are actually on duty more often than the law enforcement officers. That mentality drives us nuts as road users and makes you lose total faith in the system we are supposed to rely on.
You know, you make such interesting points, and I'm just looking at a poll that was done here by my broadband, and it is a year old, but really it's just asking, do you pay your speeding fines? And I mean, look, it's not an exhaustive study. It was only less than 200 people who voted. But no ranges at around 40% of people who do not pay their speeding fines. And here's the thing about it, is that I've heard so many people say that they've got warrants of arrest when it comes to their speeding fines. But that almost feels like it's just wording. It doesn't actually change anything for them. It doesn't feel like it's actually meant to change their behavior. And it doesn't feel like it does so. How do we get that message to law enforcement?
And well, one of the first things we have to point out about law enforcement, I myself, one of the units that's quoted a lot all the time is the Road Traffic Management Corporation's National Traffic Police Unit. I've watched them stop cars for speeding in an 80 kilometer per hour zone that were clearly driving below 80 right in front of me, to which I stopped and said to them, what speed are you enforcing that you're stopping people? And they said 60. I said, but there's a road sign right there visible from where we stand that's 80. What you are doing is fraudulent. You can't issue fines for a 60 kilometer per hour zone in an 80 zone. They insisted that people drive fast and they do their thing. I've reported it to the authorities, no feedback. The problem I've got is that even the law enforcement officers we are supposed to trust, they have no understanding for the law. To them, it's a revenue. I've got a video on YouTube where an officer admits to me that they don't wear protective clothing or reflective jackets when they enforce speeds because then people don't speed and their bosses push them so that they can collect money. While we are trying to turn this into a low-hanging fruit revenue generation model, we are simply going to drive the public further and further away from compliance. And people are going to buying driving licenses, buying vehicle registrations.
Stanley, I've got 30 seconds. Barbara Creasy still said 87% of crashes occurred due to human behavior. That's still something we have to change. We as ourselves are responsible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all comes down to human behavior. What do we do to make ourselves safer on the road? You cannot pass blame to anybody else when you are the victim. It's just not possible.
Yeah, we certainly hope we change our behavior and we do this a little bit less. And I'm really hoping that this number of 1,502 goes down to absolutely zero in the next festive season as well. But Stanley, appreciate your time. Some interesting thoughts as well from yourself. Stanley Bezuidenhout, a car crash investigator and former road accident fund contractor.